Raising James on my own was never going to be easy. This was especially true after he came into the world a little early. He has been my everything from the start, my little boy who clung to me as his safe haven. It's just that when he started sleepwalking at the age of 7, it rattled me more than I can say. Night after night, it was the same soft squeak of his door, the faint echo of his footsteps in the quiet house. No matter how peacefully he fell asleep, he would always find his way into these silent escapades. More often than not, I would find him there, sitting at the kitchen table or standing in the living room, hidden in the stillness of the night. One time, I found James sitting at the kitchen table, apparently engrossed in a meal. Only there was no food on his plate, yet he ate with an earnestness that belied the absence of food. Somehow, he had managed to get a plate and fork while sleepwalking, and now he was sitting there, picking up the fork, scooping at the empty plate, and putting it in his mouth to take bites of air. What I found even stranger, though, was that he seemed to be having a conversation with someone at the table. His head was turned toward an empty chair, and his lips moved silently as if he were talking to someone. Every so often, he would tilt his head as if listening. Then, he'd let out a raspy little laugh. It was like he'd just heard the funniest joke. I would just stand there and watch him, unsure if I should wake him or let this sleepwalking episode play out. Another time, at 1 a.m., I awoke, engulfed by an inexplicable sense of dread. It was a silent alarm that something was wrong, a feeling that hung in the air like a thick fog. I rose from my bed and made my way to James' room, only to find it empty, the bed untouched. My mind raced with possibilities. I checked the bathroom and kitchen, but they too were empty of his presence. I was approaching the living room. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed the front door was ajar. A sliver of the night peered through. I stepped out. I saw James bathed in a streetlight's eerie glow. He stood alone in the empty road. His arms moved with purpose. They orchestrated an animated discussion with an invisible confidant. His gestures punctuated the silent air like a conductor's baton. As I approached, he continued his pantomime, oblivious to my presence. It was only when I clasped his wrist that he erupted into a scream, a startled cry of someone seeing a stranger where they expected familiarity. I reassured him, "It's me, your mother." Slowly, his confusion lessened and he drifted back from his sleepwalking episode. As we stepped back into the house, James was already halfway to his room. I called out to him, "James, what were you doing outside?" He paused, turning to me with a curious glint in his eyes. "I was talking with someone." His response was so unexpected, I nearly burst into laughter right there. "Talking? To who?" I asked, bewildered. "Out in the street." "You were there, weren't you?" he replied, a hint of confusion in his voice. "Yes, I remember you sleepwalking to the street," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "But you just said you were talking with someone. Who were you talking to?" At that, James let out a peculiar laugh, not the mischievous giggle of a child with a secret, but rather the innocent chuckle of one caught in an act they didn't want coming to light. With a swift turn, he darted past me, his laughter trailing behind him as he shut his bedroom door with a soft click. I stood there for a moment, caught between surprise and confusion. James' words had hit me like a curveball, unexpected and oddly intriguing. But then again, kids have a knack for spinning tales out of thin air. Maybe he'd been dreaming while sleepwalking, conjuring up imaginary conversations under that streetlight. After all, it was just him out there, and the mosquitoes if you want to count them too. As I lay back in my bed, the quiet of the night wrapped around me like a blanket. The mattress beneath me felt familiar and comforting, but my mind was far from at ease. I stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. The soft glow of the street lamp outside cast gentle light through the window. Every small noise seemed amplified in the stillness, the house settling, the distant sound of a car. I couldn't help but listen for the one sound I dreaded most, the creak of James' door, the signal that he was on the move again. I feared that James would start sleepwalking. But he might end up somewhere worse than last time. I was left to wait in the quiet. I hoped the night would pass without incident. But of course, things didn't go as I hoped. The night took a turn for the bizarre at exactly 3 a.m. I was in a deep sleep when a sudden noise jerked me awake. Propping myself up, I scanned the darkness of my room, waiting for my vision to adjust. After a moment, it became clear that the source of my disturbance wasn't in my room. I sat in silence, deciding to wait it out, to catch whatever it was that had woken me. Not even 5 minutes had passed when I heard it, James' voice. It sounded muffled, as if he were talking through a thick pillow. But I could still make out snippets of phrases drifting through the walls. Play together forever. Are you going to take me away? Should I tell Mom? It sounded like he was having a full-on conversation. We are the only two that live in this house, so I figured it had to be sleep talking. Compelled by a mix of concern and curiosity, I rose and made my way to his room. With each step down the hall, his voice grew clearer. Take me, so we can play together forever. I didn't expect there to be a response, but one came. A voice that sounded like a man and a woman responded back saying, "The time hasn't come yet, James." My heart pounding, I flung his door open, only to find him sound asleep in his bed, alone. The room was empty, no sign of the otherworldly conversation I had just overheard. I tiptoed into the room, eyes darting to every corner. Under the bed? Nothing but dust bunnies. The closet? Just a bunch of clothes and old toys. It was just me and my son in the room, and he was out like a light, not even stirring when I checked under his bed. I backed out of his room, leaving the door cracked open just enough to spy through. I was half expecting him to start up his conversation again. But nope, all was quiet except for the sound of his breathing. I must have stood there like a statue for a good 5 minutes, waiting for something, anything. Eventually, I called it quits. Dragging myself back to my room, I flopped onto my bed, my head hitting the pillow with a thud. It was 3:21 a.m. I needed to catch some sleep, fast. Tomorrow's school run wasn't going to drive itself. Stealing glances at James in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but notice how unusually quiet he was. Just sitting there, his gaze fixed outside, watching the world zoom by in a blur of colors and shapes. It was like he was lost in another world, one that only he could see. We rolled into the school parking lot, and instantly, the place was buzzing with life. Kids were everywhere. They chattered away, their backpacks bounced as they sprinted to the school doors. The bell rang out, a loud reminder that the day was starting, urging everyone to hurry. I turned to James, who was still in his own little world. "James, come on, buddy, you're gonna be late," I urged. He finally looked at me, his eyes still distant. Without a word, he put his backpack on and opened the car door. I called out to him softly, "I love you, have a good day." The sound of the door slamming closed was his reply. He didn't say anything. I watched him walk towards the school entrance. His figure got smaller and smaller until he vanished into the crowd of students. The store greeted me with a blast of cold air. This was a stark contrast to the warm and lively schoolyard. Carts clattered down aisles, brimming with goods, as shoppers bustled about. The electronics department was a jungle of gadgets. The screens gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Approaching the counter, I asked the attendant, "Do you know where the cameras are?" "Like the baby monitor cameras?" It had been years since I needed one, back when James was just a tiny thing. "Sure thing, ma'am, follow me," the attendant said. He led me through a maze of shelves until we stood before an impressive lineup of cameras. They were for everything from security to baby monitors. He pointed to a sleek model. "This is our latest, records in 1080p. 1080p? The term was new to me, but it sounded advanced. The price of $120 seemed reasonable for something fresh off the production line. "I'll take that one," I decided. The worker nodded, his smile one of a job well done, a customer convinced. I spread the contents of the box across the living room carpet, the camera and monitor emerging from a nest of bubble wrap and cardboard. The monitor, a sleek, 5-inch LCD screen, felt cool and lightweight in my hands. I followed the quick start guide, connecting it to our home Wi-Fi with a few taps and a bit of patience as the device blinked. In James' room, I surveyed the walls, looking for the perfect vantage point. The corner near the ceiling seemed perfect. It was high enough to escape casual notice, but it was angled just right to keep his bed within the frame. I held the mounting bracket against the wall. I marked the drill points with a pencil. Then, I set it aside. The drill whirred to life, a fine dust falling like snow as I bored holes into the drywall. I secured the bracket with screws, ensuring it was snug and level. The camera clicked into place on the bracket with a satisfying snap. Its lens peered down like a silent guard. Back in my room, I switched on the monitor. The picture flickered on, startlingly clear. I could see the fine weave of James' bedspread, the soft rise and fall of his pillow. This was a significant upgrade from the old one I'd misplaced years ago. Now, all that was left was to wait for the school day to get done so I could go get him. At 2:30 p.m., the school day waned into afternoon. There was James, approaching my car with a smile that lit up his face. It was a stark contrast to how he was acting this morning. In his hands, he clutched a pencil and paper, artifacts of a day's learning. He seemed to have shed the morning's shadows, now radiating the cheerful energy I knew so well. He hopped into the car with a bright, "Hey Mom," his voice ringing with the familiar warmth of his usual self. "Hey James, how was school?" I asked, eager to hear about his day. "It was good," he said back. "Remember that girl Sarah I told you about? She made a bracelet for me." He leaned forward with his arm outstretched to show me the bracelet. It was a simple but charming band of woven threads. Its colors were a vibrant mix of blues and greens, intertwined with tiny beads. As he shared this token of friendship, I noticed the principal making his way toward our car. I rolled down the window, greeted by his amiable smile. "Are you James' mom?" he asked. "Yes, I am," I replied, a hint of curiosity in my voice. "Could you pull over into the parking lot? I need to talk to you about something that happened at school today." "It's nothing bad, just something I thought should be brought to your attention," he said, his tone reassuring yet serious. I obliged, steering the car into the parking lot to avoid holding up the line of parents behind me. Stepping out, I approached the principal, who began to relay his concerns. "One of the teachers noticed James doing something odd," he started. "We don't often see it with the other kids. During playtime, while the other kids were playing with toys and moving about, James was off by himself in a corner. But it wasn't just that he was alone, he seemed to be talking to someone who wasn't there. The teacher found it intriguing and brought it to my attention, so I thought I'd pass it along to you." Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. I'll be sure to talk to him about it, I managed to say, even though I was kinda drawing a blank on what else to throw in there. The principal seemed okay with that. He gave me a nod and a smile that felt comforting. Then, he turned and disappeared back into the school. I climbed back into the car, my mind whirling, but I kept the chat with the principal to myself. James' little voice broke through my thoughts. What did the principal want, Mommy? Did I do something bad? He asked, a hint of concern in his words. I met his worried gaze in the rearview mirror. No, you didn't. You aren't in any trouble. Don't worry about it, I reassured him quickly. He seemed to take it in stride, like the principal had with my response. We headed home. But now, I was eager to use that baby monitor tonight. I wanted to see who James was talking to. That night, as I lay in bed, the baby monitor's soft glow was the only light in the room. James was fast asleep, nothing out of the ordinary. I watched him for hours, his chest rising and falling with each breath, so peaceful, so normal. Eventually, my own eyes betrayed me, growing heavy until I couldn't fight the sleep any longer. I set the monitor on the nightstand, telling myself I was just resting my eyes, but sleep took me. It felt like only a moment had passed when I woke up, the clock glaring 3 a.m. back at me. I wasn't sure what had woken me, but a mother's intuition told me to check on James. I grabbed the monitor, and my heart nearly stopped. James was standing on his bed, stiff as a board, staring into the darkness of his room. His face would contort into wide smiles before relaxing again. He was silent, motionless, just frozen. I rubbed my eyes, trying to adjust to the brightness of the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And then I saw it. In the darkest corner of his room, there was a silhouette. It was too thin to be a man, too tall to be a woman, just standing there, arms hanging by its sides, its eyes faintly glowing. It was staring at James, and James was smiling back at it, a smile I'd never seen before. I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched, unable to move, unable to understand. The springs of my bed groaned as I finally managed to stand up, intent on going to James' room. But then, a voice, an impossible voice that was both deep and high at the same time, filled the room. The time has come, James, it said. I watched on the baby monitor as a smile started to appear on James' lips. It was slow and deliberate, like a flower opening. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy, the kind that reaches deep into the soul and lights up every corner. But this was different. There was an intensity to it that I had never seen before, a fervor that seemed almost otherworldly. His lips stretched wider and wider. They went far beyond the innocent grins of birthday surprises or Christmas mornings. This smile was too wide, too full of ecstasy. It was the smile of someone who had glimpsed paradise. It was a smile that seemed to know secrets that humans weren't meant to know, a smile that whispered of realms and beings beyond our understanding. And as his smile grew, it took on a life of its own, almost too big for his little face, too knowing, too eager. It was a smile that didn't belong in the innocent context of a child's bedroom. It was a smile that could freeze the blood, a smile that said, I am seeing what you cannot see, I am feeling what you cannot feel, and it is magnificent. It was a smile that took my breath away. Not with awe, but with a primal fear. It clawed at my chest, a warning from my instincts that something was very wrong. The figure in the corner began to contort, its form twisting in ways that defied the natural laws of our world. Slowly, agonizingly, it unfurled like a grotesque flower, its chest splitting open to reveal not flesh and bone, but an abyss, a portal to an impossible reality. It was as if the very fabric of its being was unzipping, unraveling to expose a glimpse into a realm that was never meant to be seen by human eyes. Inside, there was another world, a twisted mirror of our own. There, the sky bled with nameless colors. The ground pulsed with its own life. And there, I saw them, children, dozens of them, each wearing that same unnerving smile as my son. Their grins were wide and unnatural. They stretched their faces into masks of ecstasy. Their eyes were empty yet alight with a haunting glow. They stared into nothingness, seeing wonders and horrors. A sight that would drive a sane mind to the brink. This world within the figure was alive, breathing and writhing, a living tapestry of souls ensnared in eternal playtime. It was a place where joy was twisted into something sinister, where innocence was a currency for some unfathomable exchange. And as I watched, frozen in terror, I knew that this was no mere figment of the mind. This was a gateway to a realm where the rules of our existence were but a distant memory, and where my son was about to become another smiling face among the lost. My son's eyes sparkled with excitement as he spoke. "Now we can play together forever." In an instant, James was pulled towards the figure, and I watched in horror as my son was absorbed into this entity, this thing. I stood frozen, a scream stuck in my throat, my body refusing to move. All I could do was watch as my son disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone with the echo of his last words.